complete.
Hello everyone, welcome back to the channel. My name is Nico Bree and this is a new series that I'm going to start, basically explaining my thought process when I'm detailing my 3D models in SketchUp. For this video, I'm going to explain the sort of high-level thought process that goes through my mind when I decide I would like to design something or remodel something. As I'm sure you've seen, I made my best work in spaceship design, so I'll be mainly touching on those points more so than other kinds of models, although I believe that these high-level topics apply to other kinds of models as well. So without further ado, let's get into it. First, you want to establish what kind of model you're trying to make, and just to name a few, we have spaceships, interior design, buildings, boats, cars, military vehicles, equipment, weapons, etc. Why do you want to do that though? You want to get your mindset focused on the certain levels of details that may be applied to your model. For example, a spaceship has some basic fundamental details when you look at both real spaceships and fictional. Typically, they have a cockpit or bridge or front-facing type of body. Then they have the main body and then the engines in the aft. In some cases, there's different styles, but we're getting into that later. Another example is a building. A building typically has foundation, a structure, windows, and doors. Once you established what kind of model you're going to make, you need to then consider what your style is going to be. And this part is mainly the subjective piece because every artist is unique. And in the case for those who are still developing their style and may not necessarily have one to really bank off of, it's a good idea for the sake of experience to just recreate stuff that you see online or recreate other artists' work. Now, I want to make a very, very important point of not using other people's art for your own benefits and for your own exposure. There are some serious legal ramifications that can result from doing such things. I suggested that mainly because it helps you build your skill set. Following what the successful people have done will build a strong foundation for when you do develop your own style and branch off. Next, you want to consider what you're making your model for. Each purpose determines what techniques you may need to consider and why. For example, are you going to be using your model for rendering or for video games? With rendering, you typically have a lot less restriction when it comes to the amount of polygons that you have in your model. In other words, you can have more detail. Versus video games, there may be strict requirements for polygons simply because you have to think about real-time performance of that model in whatever simulated world that you're developing. For the sake of this explanation video, I will use my style as the example and how I think about my ships. So my philosophy for ships and their detail stems from the core understanding that I'm going to be using my models for rendering. I'm not using them in video games because I just don't have that experience for them yet. So when I think about my spacecraft, and as far as the plot lines and the lore for them, which definitely play a role in how I detail them, I think about the classes. So my classes are small craft, which are fighters, interceptors, bombers, corvettes, frigates, cruisers, battle cruisers, assault ships, carriers, titans, command titans. You've seen my channel. So a lot of those models dictate how much detail I'm going to put in. So from a high level point, each ship class has essentially its own set of requirements that I typically develop in my own headcanon, and I use sources such as video games as well as the real world to help me formulate what my models are going to be detailed like. And just to name a few video games that I actually get a lot of inspiration from, aside from just the real world naval ships, is Nexus the Jupiter Incident, Homeworld, EVE Online, Independence War 2, Fractured Space, Halo, and more. So if you see a lot of hints and references to those video games, they are definitely heavily influenced and help me develop my style. The model that I'm currently working on in this video, which is the Ezekiel class, I actually am remodeling for the third time because it goes back to my point earlier in the video where I mentioned not using other people's art as a reason or as a promotion of your own art and your own style. I wanted to deviate away from the direct Halo theme. Even though a lot of my inspiration comes from Halo, I still have my own style and way of building spacecraft now, and I wanted to deviate from the old Halo ways. So that's kind of a better explanation of what I mean when you want to use other people's styles and other professional artists' styles to learn the fundamentals of detail and then have your own style built off of that background. And next I go into actually what the frigate is going to be used for, and that stems from actual real reference material, as well as going back and touching on some of the video games that I mentioned and what their spacecraft do. So for frigates, what I found is that typically they're built around a dedicated purpose. For example, patrolling, anti-submarine warfare, and escort class roles in the case of real-world navies, and in video games, they typically have some sort of dedicated weapon system, such as, in the case of Homeworld, ion cannons, torpedoes, marine boarding, defense, anti-air, flak, or assault. In EVE Online, they can be fit for electronic countermeasures, mining, stealth bombing, exploration, or just general purpose roles. And in Halo, they're very similar to real world in the sense of escorts, ground attack, and or just general purpose. For my style and story, my frigates are used for patrol, fleet escort, and marine deployment. So if I was to point to a particular reference from the references I mentioned earlier, it would mainly still lean towards the Halo raison d'etre, if you will, for frigates, and still with my own personal style. So now that I have my style and I've designated roles to my frigate, next is really just the fun, gamey, real-world kind of applicable parts of choosing how versatile you want the ship to be. And this goes beyond just the three fundamental parts of, the basic bridge, cockpit, body, and engines, and goes into really what makes your ship yours, essentially. And some things that you want to think about, or at least the things that I think about when I'm designing my frigates, since I grew up on a lot of the different worlds and universes of spacecraft, if you will. I think, do I want my ship to be kind of homeworldy, where it's kind of dedicated to like maybe one weapon system, like the ion cannon or torpedo frigate, or do I want it to be more like a real world frigate where it kind of has a hangar bay, kind of like a real frigate, and is anti-submarine based, so like maybe anti-ship based, or do I want it to be more like EVE Online where it's multi-purpose, or maybe Nexus where you can just fit a multitude of different modules, weapon systems, and abilities to the ship and just really make it fit in the world and do its purpose, essentially, And after I've kind of, developed what I'm gonna do with the ship as far as its style and everything, I think, okay, what kind of visual person am I? Am I gonna be more of a component visual person where I have the majority of the components visible for people to see, such as like my shield emitters for my spacecraft? At one point, I was always designing different shield emitters and components, almost like I was kind of building out like a layout of equipment for like a video game, if you will, and I just found that design style and just artistic style really fun, and to write about it, it just kind of made sense, but eventually I kind of phased out of it, for the sake of my style and just the detailing that I wanted to convey, so it depends, and again, that goes back to more of the style you want to develop, and it takes practice. I'm not going to sugarcoat it. I'm not going to say that, oh, looking at a whole bunch of images of different spacecraft from different universes, different IPs and stuff is going to help you nail down your detailing with a snap. It takes a lot of practice, and to be honest with you, I will fair warn you that sometimes your style is just going to hit a blocker, mainly because you are seeing essentially an overload of different styles from different spacecraft and different IPs that you're just like, I don't know which way to go, and it's okay for that to happen. Just remember that you have the core fundamentals here that you can reference for when you hit those kind of roadblocks. And that's why I'm making this video, so you guys can reference it. If you're just going through a bad day or something and it's like, oh, I can't do this, I don't know what, it's missing something, and that will never honestly go away, but you can fulfill it sometimes, I will admit. You can reference this video, and in this series, like I said, I'm just going to be diving deeper into the different aspects of how I do my detailing, and I hope this overview really helps you consider those topics that I mentioned and help you really flesh out your design style. And thank you for listening to me, indulging me, and I hope to see you guys next time in the next video.